this is your first time at NCJW. Okay, so please, again, as I said earlier, because now I get to do more pitches, please look at the kind of programs that we have. I bet you'll find something that you can get involved in, whether it's a program like this, other advocacy issues, lobbying issues, really trying to make a difference in the lives of women, children, and families, and making a difference in our community. We're always in need of volunteers for all of our programs, and we have people of all ages that can use volunteers. We have our talk lines. Some of them are commitments for long periods of time, and some of them are one-time commitments, like our clothing giveaway. And if you've ever been to our clothing giveaway, we have people that line up. Last year they started at night, lining up, and they come in through our parking lot. We give them bags, and they're able to get clothes, whatever they want, in a bag for them, themselves, their families, their children. We also provide a community resource fair. We partner with many organizations throughout Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, the City of West Hollywood, the Soba Food Pantry, Jewish Vocational Service, Department of Social Services brings their mobile health clinic out, all of our programs, and many, many other organizations to provide services, because some of these people, this is the first time they've even thought about providing or getting services. Oh, I guess I have to keep going here, huh? Okay. As you know, with political people, they have a tendency not to always be exactly on time. We call it mayoral time, though neither one of them are mayor yet. Both of them are trying to be, so they're getting used to being able to be on mayoral time. Yes, we have a question. Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about an award that you recently won, NCJWLA? Was it through the Homeland Security?
FBI, actually.
FBI.
The National Council of Jewish Women in Los Angeles received a Community Leadership Award from the local FBI district region. Along with many others, we were invited to Washington, D.C. to receive the award from the director of the FBI. That was because of our partnership with the FBI in areas of human trafficking, domestic violence, dealing with sexual predators, internet safety, and things like that. Partnering with our law enforcement is one of the things that we do. Partnering with social service organizations are also important things and keys to making what we do successful. We are a collaborative organization, as you can see this evening. We have others with us tonight, and we want to especially thank Ben the ARC for really stepping up with the April 3rd and this event to really kind of pull it together for us, and the Young Invincibles as well for coming here and providing tremendous support, and some of the food, which is in the other room. So I understand that we can now move on, and we will do that now. Yes?
Are we using the index card to pose questions to the candidates?
As a matter of fact, the next person I'm going to introduce is going to answer those questions, and her name is Ruth Williams, and she's the Director of Advocacy for the National Council of Jewish Women in Los Angeles.
Hi. Thank you for your patience. It's appreciated. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay. If you have any questions, you've got white cards in your packets. Please fill out your questions, and they will be submitted to the candidates. A volunteer will be picking them up, so just hold them up in the air. And please understand that due to time constraints, with 200 people here, we can't guarantee that the questions are all going to be answered. Tonight, our moderator, Dave Bryan, joined KCAL News team in 1994 after previously working at KTTV in Los Angeles. As the political reporter for the KCAL Prime News, his beat includes national and international stories, state capitol coverage from Sacramento, and local politics in Southern California. And today, Dave has the distinction of being the only Los Angeles TV reporter who exclusively covers political stories. He began his career as an investigative reporter in Baltimore, Maryland, after uncovering a heating oil scandal that left both poor people and the government cheated by unscrupulous companies. He shared a Columbia DuPont Award with his colleagues for Best Local Investigative Reporting. Since then, Dave has traveled the world covering important stories, including the crackdown on democracy in China after the government crackdown at Beijing's Tiananmen Square in 1989. Then in Somalia, he sent back live reports to stations around the United States as American Marines landed at Mogadishu. Dave has covered presidential, nominating conventions, and campaigns for over 25 years. While at KTTV, he was the lead reporter for the first live gavel-to-gavel trial coverage in Southern California, and part of the news team, which won him a Columbia DuPont Award for coverage of the first Rodney King trial in Simi Valley. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland, where he received his BA in sociology, and has received many other industry awards, including Regional Associated Press Honors and the UPI Maurice Williams Award. Please join me tonight in welcoming Dave Ryan as our moderator for this evening.
Let me first of all say that I'm so glad that everyone is here. It's a great audience, and we've got just a limited period of time because I don't know, did Ruth explain the situation of how we're going to do this? So there was a scheduling conflict, and what happened in the end was that the candidates were working on different schedules and they couldn't be here at the same time. So we're going to do 30 minutes with each candidate. I'm going to ask the same questions to each candidate so you can compare and contrast their positions on issues. And in addition to the questions I'm asking, which will be the same and in the same order, we'll also be taking questions from you in the audience, as well as we're going to take people from Twitter who are sending in questions, so we'll have a good variety, I think, of issues and problems to talk about. There's certainly no shortage of problems in LA these days, so we could probably go on for hours, but 30 minutes for each. And you all know Mr. Eric Garcetti, city councilman, former president of the city council, and now candidate for mayor. So we'll start with Mr. Garcetti, and after we're finished, Wendy Gruhl will come in. We'll take a few minutes to get her seated and set up here, and then we'll move forward. So thanks very much for joining us. And I think the first question probably relates to your transportation tonight, because you were stuck in traffic, I understand, as we all have been on a regular basis. So the question is about the 405 corridor, which affects a lot of people in this room. And the question is, are you prepared to build some form of rapid transit through the 405 corridor while you're mayor of Los Angeles? And what would that be? And how are you going to pay for it, by the way?
That's it. Okay. Start with the 405. The easy questions first, and we'll build up from there. So, first of all, good evening. Thank you, Dave, so much for the question. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Ruth, for your activism and your amazing work. It's great to be here with everybody. We have a family history with NCJW. My mom used to be a volunteer with the literacy program in our schools. The Workman's Circle, which is one of our co-sponsors. My great-grandparents were very involved, and so it's wonderful to be here. And let me get back to the 405 now. The 405 right now, you're experiencing the widening of it, which, while maybe a somewhat needed project, is kind of described like finding a slightly bigger sponge to throw into the ocean and wondering why it's waterlogged the moment it hits there. It's not going to do much to alleviate the choke points that will still have it way, way over capacity. And for a long time, since the beginning of this campaign, I have talked about this most choked artery in America having a transit, which in my opinion has to be rail, and probably should be heavy rail, not light rail, because even if you look at the number of passengers we have to alleviate, light rail probably wouldn't do enough. That goes from the North San Fernando Valley basically to LAX, including a transit tunnel through the 405 pass that would allow you to be able to go essentially from Sherman Oaks to UCLA in 5 or 10 minutes. Now to pay for it, we have to find the funding. Some of it already exists in Measure R for us to be doing the scoping, and that's already underway. The good news is we're already doing that. We have a great engineering firm looking at that, and they presented to me months ago a few different options, a busway, a light rail, and a heavy rail. They actually were the ones who convinced me a heavy rail is what we're going to need. And I often think we can't afford to do transit lines wrong. You have one chance to do them right. The red line doesn't stop at the Hollywood Bowl. There's a plaque up to the guy who stopped it from happening because he was seen as a hero in the neighborhood. Now he's probably the most hated man in the neighborhood because if there had been a stop at the Hollywood Bowl, we actually would have had not the traffic when people get off at Hollywood Highland and take a shuttle bus or whatever. When the subway wasn't extended down Wilshire, same thing. When the Green Line didn't go to LAX. So the way you can pay for it, one of the ways though, is the transit tunnel itself would probably have two levels to it. One would be a toll road on the top for cars to be able to pay $10 to go from one end of the hill to the other in that short period of time. That would help fund through some sort of kind of public-private partnership as a part of it. But the big dollars are going to come through what's left to Measure R, probably another transit bond, and federal money. And as somebody who's been very closely working with the Obama administration, I think I'm well poised as mayor to be able to access that money and to be able to make the case why this is so important. And we are the #1 choked artery in America. So this is an American problem, not just Los Angeles.
How high is that on your priority list?
Oh, traffic is right up there at the very top.
I mean, this particular project.
The 405, if we look at transit projects, there's a number that are already underway. In terms of alleviating our traffic, it would probably be the most needed one, period. But we're already well underway with the Expo line. That'll be finished in the next couple years. We'll break ground on the Crenshaw line shortly, extension of Wilshire, and some others that are further along. So that this would follow, it doesn't in any way reflect its priority.
I think everyone would agree that rapid transit is great in terms of helping us get from one place to another, but sometimes it brings negative consequences to neighborhoods where stations are built, stops are located, even the system itself running through. It brings density, can bring congestion because everybody wants to live so they can walk to one of the stops. What would you do as mayor to deal with those potential problems on the 405 area, but other areas of the city that are already experiencing that?
Well, I don't see it as much as attracting density as alleviating density. I mean, we're going to have the density of our city, period. It's now the most densely populated metropolitan area in the United States, more than the New York, kind of Newark area. And so our choice is not whether or not we bring density, it's whether we deal with density. And for me, that's why public transit is so critically important. We need to do busways and light rail where we can, and we need to do subways where we need to. So for instance, Wilshire Corridor, you need to have that subway continue just because it is that is, in LA street traffic terms, the most crowded area in Los Angeles now. And being able to link those two together, a Wilshire line and a 405 line, is going to be one of the most critical things you can do. It's a good thing when people bring, housing and other things around those lines, but that doesn't mean we embrace that at any density or any height or any bad design. I've seen too many developers who come in and say, this is transit-oriented development, as if we're just supposed to lie down and just say yes, no matter how bad the design is, no matter how poorly thought out it is. So I always listen to communities. I mean, we're going through this right now in Hollywood with the proposed Millennium Project, which it's necessary to fill in those empty parking lots in Hollywood. It can help us reduce traffic, but that doesn't mean we need to have towers that are twice as tall as anything that's there.
Well, let's look at the flip side of the equation, which is that there's a limited pot of money going to transportation. And you've got a lot of different forms of transportation that need to be funded. One of them is public buses, which are the only form of transportation for many of the citizens who can least afford to go in another way. What guarantee or what kind of promise can you make in terms of funding public buses, which has been cut back in some cases because of the limited funding for these other projects?
And the lines won't succeed, the main bus lines, the rapid bus line like the Orange Line or rail lines, if we don't have the connectors working. So in other words, you can't just put everything into rail. We can't put everything into rapid busways. Because if people don't find the connectors, that last mile or the first mile, then the lines won't get the ridership they need. I mean, the day before the election on March 4th, I just took the rail lines all day long, talked to people, and really talked through some of the challenges they have. If you have a bike, you can get to it. If you live close, you can walk to it. But so many people that I talked to said, by the time I drive my car to that main line, I might as well just continue in my car if they have that option. So I do think we have to continue to not only look at those buses. One promise I can make as mayor is I would like to see us look at our own dash bus lines and extend those to be more aggressive with our federal funds and getting MTA dollars to the city buses, because those don't function just as connectors. They can also alleviate car trips by allowing us to circulate in our own neighborhoods. We've been waiting for a long time, for instance, in Silver Lake, where I live, so that we can get people out of the hills and go to do their shopping, meet a friend for dinner without having to get in a car.
But even beyond the dash buses and the connectors, there are a lot of people in this city who depend on long bus rides to go across the city to get to work or to be with their family or get to school. And those seem to be, in many cases, the lines that get cut. Where the funding gets cut, the buses don't run very often. They're packed with people practically hanging out of the windows. What are you going to do to keep or increase the funding for these kinds of buses which so many people depend on?
Well, one thing I'm in favor of, we had Measure J, which would have accelerated Measure R. It passed by 71% in the city of LA, but outside the city of LA it failed because we didn't really listen to some of the other cities and some of the other parts of the city that needed transit as much. And I think that we're going to have to look at reconstituting that so that it not just includes new lines, but also bus services. And I would be in favor of lowering the 2/3 threshold to 55% for transportation initiatives.
Let's move on to another subject, which is a big issue in our city, and that is balancing the budget and consequently, maintaining or restoring city services. You opposed Measure A, which would have increased the sales tax. So I think the question that some people have is, how are you going to make up for those hundreds of millions of dollars over a period of years that would have flowed from the increased sales tax? How are you going to make up for that in terms of raising revenue? Still $100 to $150 million deficit right now, and in terms of cutting budget or cutting other things to save.
Well, let's put out a couple of facts. One, first of all, I think it was a false choice because the assumption was that money would have flowed in and everything else would have kept coming. But I think if you put a sales tax that's higher than everybody else around, you lose other revenues. So you might have gotten 100 million extra, but then you lose 100 million because people aren't shopping here anymore because we've become so business unfriendly. Look at our business tax, which I'm sure some people in the audience pay. It is the highest of the 88 cities in the county of LA. It's a gross receipts tax. It taxes you even when you lose money. So it's no wonder that people leave the city of Los Angeles and incorporate in any city but LA because we have that in place. Similar if we did the same thing with the sales tax. So as much as it was tempting to me to say, sure, why don't we just tax people 0.5% more, which by the way would hit the poor disproportionately, it's a regressive tax, I was opposed to that. The way we do it is twofold. One is we have to focus on growing our economy in general. And I come to this race with the #1 record in job growth. And the Chamber of Commerce every year does a study, and I'm #1 in job growth. In the midst of a recession, places like Hollywood, Silver Lake, Echo Park, Atwater Village, we've added independent businesses, new jobs, we've helped the big businesses expand, the hospitals, the studios who are beginning to invest a lot, again in their studios, the physical plants. So that is the most critical piece. But second, the other facts are, this year was projected, just 4 years ago, that our city budget would have a deficit of $1.1 billion, and we'd be bankrupt by next year. I want to repeat that just one more time, because as you're looking at this race, this is a differentiation, and it's a critical thing. That 4 years ago, it's not just a throwaway statement that we were going to be bankrupt in 5 years. So we had to do the hard work of pension reform, of reducing the number of positions we have. 85% of our costs in the city are people costs. How many we have, what we pay them, and the benefits they have. I jumped into that and did it. Hundreds of millions of dollars that reduced, as you're correct, to about $115 million from $1.1 billion, what our deficit is going to be as we look at it this year. That's like 90%. That's like going 90 yards down the field in a football game. We're on the 10-yard line, which doesn't guarantee we're going to score. But that's a lot of work.
Right, but I don't mean to be an ingrate,
sure.
But $115 million is still not chump change.
Absolutely
so,
not. But we also have $250 million in a reserve fund. We've showed 11 years in a row our ability to close much bigger deficits than that. So the work that we have to do, absolutely, and the difference in this is, between me and my opponent, is I did that work with pension reform. I'm the only person in this race who has delivered it. It's difficult work. It means sometimes some of the unions who are my friends and who I work with very well don't line up to give you, millions of dollars in independent expenditures when you run, but it's the right thing to do.
So the question, though, is what do you do from here on? If you're the next mayor,
so,
what are you going to do to raise revenue and cut expenses?
So the ways we can get more expenses cut / more revenue is we do what I negotiated with some of our unions, which now they pay out of pocket for the first time for their health care premiums. Everybody here who works outside of city government and government probably pays a percentage in for your health care premiums. Our city workers don't at all, except now some that pay 5%. I believe we should all get up to at least 10%. The private sector average is 24%. Now, public employees don't have things like Social Security and other things that are out there. So I think that's a fair amount to be able to preserve what we have. And I put that out there, 3 months ago, not just in the last week or so. We have to look at controlling our costs and also looking at efficiencies. I'll give you one example. We had email systems in the city of Los Angeles that were, I think we had 50 servers guarded by 15 people in programming languages we haven't used for 20 years. We had gum and Scotch tape keeping them together. We put that out to bid, and Gmail won the bid. And people at City Hall were like, how can you possibly move our email away from these secure servers, which were not secure at all? And we did that. We saved over $1 million in that first year. Each year, by doing that, we have to come up to the times, and as a mayor, I want general managers who will employ technology, modern systems, and bring us at least into the early part of the 21st century, if not 2013.
I'm still not sure exactly what it is you're going to do to fill that void.
So I can give you the specific numbers. You want that? So 10% on healthcare gives you about 70 to 90 million. Then you also use the power of negotiating your healthcare premiums, and we estimate we can probably do another 30 million. We're looking at revenues that have been owed to the city, back taxes and things like parking lot operators and others, and selling off some of the debt that we just carry that people owe to us. That was put together by the Commission on Revenue Efficiency, which I constituted. That's conservatively this year going to be $50 to $70 million of that. We're seeing additional growth in pension savings, and we're also looking at some of the technological issues that I mentioned. There's 4 or 5 that we've specified in this campaign that we think is probably about 15 to 20 million. That closes the deficit and actually gives you a little bit more. I'd put that into fire services and I'd put it into rec and parks.
So you don't think it's necessary to try to renegotiate some of the salary increases?
Well, I have said we owe those salaries legally. We actually pushed them off for 2 or 3 years, in essence turning legal raises that had been negotiated in the midst of a recession into zeros. So we pushed those off. We cannot unilaterally just take them back, but I will sit down and talk to our unions about health care, about salaries, and we will together close that deficit. And I don't say that as some sort of just starry-eyed idealist or new candidate. I've done it. As city council president, I've delivered it, and it's a contrast in this race.
You mentioned that Measure A was a regressive tax, a sales tax. So what kind of, in terms of making a promise here, as mayor, will you pledge that whatever revenue sources you do adopt will not be regressive?
I will always look for the least regressive, if I can. And I will look for, I think we're getting very lazy sometimes about the revenue sources we put on the table. It's not just new taxes. I mean, technological efficiency, I guarantee you, if we don't have a chief technology officer for the city of Los Angeles. We're a $7 billion entity without a chief technology officer. That alone, anybody who's in business, anybody who's in the nonprofit world knows, that would change when I'm mayor in the first 3 months. And then we go through that, and I guarantee you that we will see tens of millions of dollars of savings in a year or 2. Get rid of our city's gross receipts tax in the future, I guarantee we'll bring more revenue in, because every time we've done it with a specific industry, it's attracted more of those companies in. Let's be smarter about our taxes, let's be smarter about our systems, and then look last at what we have to take from people or ask for in new taxes.
You know, every time we have an election, the candidates talk about dealing with the homeless problem in Los Angeles. Once again, this campaign is the same thing. But I think that some critics feel like not much has changed. There have been some changes here and there, Skid Row, for example, but it's not citywide. And so I want to know what your plan is for dealing with the homeless problem in Los Angeles.
Well, ever since I was in high school, going to Skid Row and working there, and then college working a lot on homelessness, this has been something very near and dear to me. The statistics are staggering. We're #1 in the country with a homeless capital. Give you one other statistic in my own district at Los Angeles City College. 40% of the veterans, young veterans returning from Afghanistan and from Iraq, are homeless. Our veterans who have put their lives on the line for us. We have changed things in my district, and it takes a number of years to get them in place, but what we did is 2 things. One, we started building what's called permanent supportive housing. In the past, we used to give people services on the street, which keeps them alive, but keeps them on the street, or put them in housing with no supportive services, so after a couple months they fall out because of substance abuse, mental health issues, no job training, no child care. And we put these together, and some of you who live in my district know that those conversations are very difficult about siting and building those sorts of housing projects. But we overcame people's fears and had people realize we weren't bringing homeless people to Silver Lake or Hollywood. We were deciding whether we kept them on the street or not. And the second thing we did is we learned who they were. Dave, to solve this problem, you cannot just have a statistic of 90,000 homeless people tonight. You actually have to know their names, their histories, who they are. So the homeless census we have to do every 2 years. We do it a little different in Silver Lake and in Hollywood. A project called Hollywood Forward, and in Silver Lake working with PATH, people assisting the homeless. We do interviews. I've done them myself. I remember talking to a veteran named Dave, coincidentally, who was underneath the 101 freeway. And you wake him up, give him a Subway gift card, and say, "Will you talk to us for 20 minutes? How long have you been homeless? Do you have substance abuse issues? When's the last time you did drugs or alcohol? When's the last time you had a bed, etc." Go through all of that. And then we ranked people according to who was closest to death. It was that morose of a ranking, but we started then buying people off the street who were the closest and the most vulnerable, the closest to death. In Hollywood, we did this with 174 people because I built 3 different projects to do this permanent supportive housing. So far, and there's usually about a 50% failure rate, we don't have one person that we can find who's fallen out of housing. And it's cheaper for us. Everybody in this room cares about this because it's an ethical issue, but I can go to the most hard-hearted person and say, one visit from one of those folks on the street in the emergency room in one weekend cost us $20,000. It's $5,000 or $6,000 for us to get that person off the street. So with that, that's why I've said, as mayor, I want to end chronic homelessness in the city, and that is my goal.
It seems like in the past, the city has depended on the LAPD to deal with the homeless problem, but that doesn't solve anything. It just pushes the problem from one sidewalk to another. As mayor, would you talk with Chief Beck and say we need to figure something else out? We need to figure out a different approach? The police certainly have a role in this, but it's not the ultimate solution.
Absolutely, and I think Chief Beck, who worked the Skid Row area for a long time when he was captain, knows that. I think he realizes that the LAPD cannot solve someone's homelessness, and you know, as Skid Row has quote unquote been cleaned up a little bit, it's pushed out into districts like my own. Echo Park, we saw a spike. Silver Lake, we saw a spike. We can't just move the homeless around. We actually have to give them permanent supportive housing, learn who they are, learn the differences between a foster child who's emancipated, a veteran who's been out there forever, a family that's living in a storage unit, and really case manage them.
I think the question then again is how do you pay for permanent supportive housing?
So there's lots of different ways. One, VASH vouchers, which are veterans vouchers. I got a boost in those from the Obama administration. Again, my relationship that I have with them and working with others the Obama administration wants to end homelessness among veterans. And so I want Los Angeles to be at the front of the line. You know, Los Angeles can take advantage of early education, immigration reform, gun control, healthcare reform, by going to the White House, by going to Washington and saying, we are ready, we have the infrastructure to do this, let's be first. And that's where most of the dollars come on homelessness.
What's your position on the community care facilities ordinance, which according to the United Way LA would eliminate shared housing in single-family neighborhoods, threatening, they say, the shared housing arrangements of tens of thousands of veterans, seniors, students, low-income families, and people with disabilities, but not popular necessarily with people in whose neighborhoods some of these places are located. Sure.
We need to shut down the bad operators, but I agree with them. I opposed it as it is currently drafted because I think it does go way too far. It would prevent some veterans, from former homeless folks from being able to actually be in the same places together. And so I support the United Way, the Chamber of Commerce, others who have said this would just be devastating.
Question from the audience. How will you go about protecting the filming industry in LA and urging more TV and movie work back to the city or to the area?
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a great joy to represent Hollywood, the neighborhood, which is both a place and an idea. I mean, tell people you're from LA anywhere in the world and it's pretty cool, but tell them you're from Hollywood and their eyes light up. And yet, you know, New York City would not let banks die out. Detroit wouldn't let the car industry die out. But California as a state is letting our entertainment industry bleed away. I'm very proud that we brought back things like, you know, Jimmy Kimmel being on Hollywood Boulevard, where live production used to be for decades, but it wasn't. Bringing the Academy Awards back across the street from where it started, the Roosevelt Hotel. And I've done things both locally and would continue to do things at the state level as mayor. This is actually my second highest priority statewide after school funding, is to go and to get our state legislature to lift the cap, which right now is $100 million maximum on our film tax credits, and expand the categories of the types of filming eligible, so that commercials, premium cable, only basic cable for some reason can apply, blockbusters, independent films, video gaming, which we're losing also. Every study, my own committee, which is the Jobs and Business Development Committee in City Council, showed that you get $1 back for every dollar that you put in. So it's a revenue neutral thing for the state. And it, of course, is not just about the direct jobs, but the indirect jobs of the florist, of the baker, of everybody that's around benefiting from this. So we have to put that in place. Second, at the local level, I initiated, and we're about to vote on, we passed it once, but the ordinance is coming through, a program I launched to make filming pilots free here in the city of Los Angeles. Because 3 years ago, 80% of our 1-hour network pilots filmed in LA. 2 years ago, it was 40%. Last year, it was just 2%. And TV has been one of the strong points. So we would make it completely free to film in the city of Los Angeles. And if you get picked up, your first season would be free as well.
Would you acknowledge, though, that overall the effort, while having some impact, has not been very successful?
Absolutely.
That a higher percentage is still leaving LA?
Absolutely, because our state, for some reason, I consider Silicon Valley a great part of my state. And the tech industry is really important to me. Central Valley in agriculture, I'm proud we're #1 in produce, 80% of the produce in this country. We have to get the rest of the state to understand that this is their industry. This isn't just Tinseltown. It isn't LA. It isn't, you know, just the stars and the rich producers. This is working class people in a very good industry that we export around the world. And I will use my political capital to convince those Central Valley, Northern California legislators that we have to get this done.
Just one last thing, and that is, as mayor, how will you do what no other mayor in modern times has been able to do, and that is improve the LA Unified School District?
Well, I think that we've seen this mayor actually do some work that has helped improve the LA Unified School Districts. We've seen scores go up, we've seen dropout rates go down, but it's still in many ways a horrible failure in terms of where we're at. I would stay involved in the same way that I have been involved as a council member, in two ways. One is I'd break down the walls right now that separate all of us, and especially city government, from our schools. There used to be a time when the school was literally the center of our community. If you had a local business, you'd hire the high school kids in the summer. If you didn't have any kids anymore, or never had kids, or they were at private school, you'd still donate to the local public school. The city would be involved. We'd make sure there were safe passageways for kids to and from. And now it's kind of like we have this consumerist philosophy with the school district. Go fix it. It's failing. And do it, by the way, with $7,000 per kid, the 49th out of 50th in the country, of which they only really get $5,700, of which they only get half up front, and the rest in IOUs from the state. You try running a business that way, you can't do it. You can't run a school district that way. So my number one priority is statewide to continue this conversation about making sure we elevate back up to somewhere at least in the middle of the pack. When New York City has $14,000 per student, when Massachusetts has $18,000 per student, and a reflection of our values is that we want to be basically dead last because our cost of living is more than Utah, so we can't celebrate Utah being 50th. We have the worst funded schools in the country. Second, in breaking down those walls, I will put my money where my mouth is. In my own district, I took city funds. My first month on the job in Mount Washington Elementary School, they had never had a library, auditorium, or cafeteria. And they asked me as a city council member, will I help get it built? And so came into office all excited and said, sure. And found some money that was supposed to go to anti-poverty programs. Said, I'm going to spend it in a school. And everybody at City Hall said, what are you talking about? We don't spend money in the schools. Let the school district solve their own problems. And I said, well, why would I build a community center with this money 12 blocks from a school when I could do it in a school and transform that school? And I pushed through and we did it, and that school's gone up more than 200 points. We did that with ball fields that become parks in the weekend. We've done that with parent centers that become places that people gather. We've done that with college programs where volunteers like yourselves fill out financial aid forms for kids who come from families that have never done that before. And that's what I want to do as mayor, and bridge that divide right now that either says you're a lackey of the unions or you're trying to privatize schools, and stop wedging this issue of education and bring people back together about embracing the school, hold folks accountable, take the best lessons from reformers, but let's get all involved in the schools.
Do you agree with the governor's proposal for more funding for
Absolutely.
schools that have English learners and in poverty areas?
LA Unified and Los Angeles would benefit from it, and this fight isn't over. We passed Prop 30, but now making sure that happens, we have to convince neighboring districts and cities why this is going to be important to them too, to see Los Angeles Unified succeed and the poorer districts to get a little bit more of that money.
But isn't part of the problem with LAUSD hanging on to middle class kids as well? Many of whom are now forced to go to private schools at great expense. That need the funding as well. They all need it.
Absolutely,
right?
but it would go. The district would disproportionately get the money. I mean, compared to other districts, so it would benefit almost all LA Unified schools.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I can never resist with an audience this big. If you want more information, ericgarcetti.com. You can donate, volunteer, learn more. And if you didn't get a question answered, my personal email is ericgarcetti@gmail.com. So feel free to email me directly. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Anytime you're ready, we'll get started.
I'm ready.
Okay, there you go.
All right, so first of all, welcome and thanks so much for joining us. Sorry we couldn't get everybody together at the same time, but we do what we can. So the first question is a question that affects a lot of people in the room and in LA, and that's transportation, and more specifically the 405 corridor. It's just a mess, and it was a mess before the construction and maybe after. But the question is, are you willing to commit to a rapid transit system of some kind to go through that 405 corridor while you're mayor? Is that something you're going to get done?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I want to have public transportation in Los Angeles in my lifetime and in my son's lifetime. And particularly the 405 is something that is very close to me. When I was on the city council, I commissioned a study that I paid for that looked at a variety of options under the 405, and looked at other options too, said what should we do? And when Measure R was going to the residents of the County of Los Angeles, one of the things that I pushed very hard for is inclusion, was $1 billion that would look at the options and how we proceed under the 405. It's so critical. I mean, I'm a Valley resident. I admit I'm born and raised and still live in the San Fernando Valley, and travel that 405 corridor quite often. And travel with the 405 carpool lane in the mornings, and hopefully, you know, when it is finished, we'll be having the 405 carpool lanes on the other side as well. Because as I was just coming from west of the 405, when you live west of the 405, you're a prisoner in your own home. And in Los Angeles, we need to have a seamless public transportation system, because it's not just the 405. It is the Crenshaw line, it is the subway to the sea, it is making sure that we have the kind of public transportation that people can take and get from point A to point B. Because right now, I know in the San Fernando Valley, I take from Universal City, if I don't get there, driving my car there by 7 in the morning, I can forget in the parking space. That's a disincentive. And I think that as we look at it, it's got to be a way that makes it easy for people to take. Because I don't know about you, but Carmageddon was my favorite weekend in LA. Because you could get anywhere in LA. Anywhere in LA in 20 minutes, which is what we grew up. Look at the 1984 Olympics. Everyone thought it was going to be horrible. What happened? People changed their behaviors. Now, not everyone's going to be able to take it, but let's give people options, and it's got to be not only transportation of the 405, and as we talked about, rail and subway, buses, bike lanes, walkability, you know, having the jobs, housing balance, all of those things. And right now the Valley, I think, from my perspective, has been shortchanged in the way they're going to be able to get from the Valley to this side, and we need to do a better job.
So the question is, with almost every question we'll ask tonight is, so how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah. Well, number one, Measure R, which again I was a big proponent of, is something that is critical to being able to fund that. Two, it is about the federal dollars and about public-private partnerships. There are many instances where we able, I believe, to look at, and 405 is one of those that the MTA is considering. Secondly, as I've talked to Senator Barbara Boxer, who's been a great supporter of mine and endorsed me, we have spoken about other future dollars that we'd be able to get to this region, because it affects commerce, it affects our lives, and it affects the whole country with not having the kinds of public transportation system we need. So it's going to take all of that. There is no secret bullet. There's not a big lottery over here that's going to pay for it all. It's about looking at all the different sources of funding and making it happen.
And you're talking about tunneling, is that right?
Correct. I think that's going to be, look, we've all lived through the carpool lane, experience. And that I think, again, it is going to be much easier and faster if you go underneath. It's a big investment, but look, we lost 20 years. And the investment that we could have had because of that methane gas, we lost that time. And right now we are way behind other cities. We are way behind other cities where you can take public transportation and get to the airport easily and get to where you need to go to work. We have to change people's behaviors.
So on the flip side then, sometimes rapid transit brings another set of problems. Congestion, density, everybody wants to live near the stop or live near the station, and there's a lot of traffic going in and out because of that. As mayor, how are you going to deal with that in the 405 corridor or in other areas where there already is a metro system?
Yeah. Well, there's going to be 113 new stops in the plan that MTA has put forward. Our current mayor has put together a transit-oriented development task force to start planning it, because if you look at Los Angeles, and I'm old enough to have worked for Tom Bradley, and when we opened the first leg of this subway system in Los Angeles, they weren't thinking a lot about what happened when you came up above. And there's studies that show in some cities that when you have housing above that transportation, sometimes the percentage of the people who are actually taking that public transportation is not as high as you would think. We've got to create environments there that make sure that people who live there are actually taking that public transportation. And one size does not fit all in the city of Los Angeles. That's one thing I know. You have to look at each community, each neighborhood, and what's going to be best for that neighborhood to limit the kind of traffic that is going to happen, and instead encourage the kind of jobs, housing balance so that you're having people who are walking and taking public transportation.
And speaking of which, there are many people in the city who have long bus rides across the city to get to work or to get to school or get back home. And some critics feel that there are so many other projects that are splashier, sexier, have more support in middle-class communities. The public buses always get the back end of the stick. And I want to know, as a mayor, are you going to change that? Are you going to promise to maintain or increase funding for the public buses that so many Angelenos depend on?
Well, the bus system is the heart right now of our system. I mean, more people take those buses. If you've gone on them as I have, you see this is what people depend on. And there's everything from the Orange Line bus, which of course everyone said, oh, no one's ever going to ride it. It is fabulous. More people ride it. It reached capacity so quickly. There were a lot of individuals said it's just not going to fit into our neighborhood now, and it's been a very big success. We will always have a bus system. We cannot do this by rail alone, subway alone. And as a council member, I fought very hard for us looking at Wilshire-only bus lane, looking at how we would deal with that in the city of Los Angeles, how we could focus in on keeping those buses. We need to make sure that we have every piece of this transportation system. There is no magic bullet. It will take all of that, and we can never forget that heart of the program, of the transportation system, which is our buses.
So another big question for voters this year is the city budget deficit. Both you and Mr. Garcetti opposed Measure A, which its supporters said would have raised several $100 million over the years. So now the question is, we still have a deficit in LA, whether it's 100 million, 150, it's still not chump change. How are you going to make up for that, what would have been revenue, by either cutting services, cutting somewhere in the budget, or raising new revenue? What is your plan?
Well, funny you should ask. Huh, okay. Hopefully you got this in the mail, but it's called Leading LA Forward, a plan that includes a lot of things particularly related to budget that I put forward, because I think as we're talking about the future of Los Angeles, this is something that is very, very important. So I talked about a number of areas, which of course is looking at pension reform. It's about bringing jobs to Los Angeles, and it's about efficiencies. And so when you look at this, and hopefully there's a few in the back. I'm not sure we brought 200, but I wanted to just pull to the spot so I can tell you exactly what I put in here on our budget. But it looks at a variety of things. One is consolidation of some of our departments, which are being put forward in the city of Los Angeles. It is about looking at, in our pension system, particularly looking, sorry, I'm trying to find my page here, because I had so much that I wrote in here. There's a whole plan, and my plan for balancing the budget. So it's looking at our investment practices. I believe we can save about $40 million by doing that, by looking at also our workers' compensation and as well our health care benefits. Yes, cutting the mayor's budget by 25% and the council budget, which didn't make me very many friends on that other side, but guess what, 25% is $6 million. Those are funds that we could use for street repaving. Those are funds for other things that we could do which are critically important. It looked at not only in our collections, so it's about revenue, it's about audit recommendations I've put forward, and it is about performance-based budgeting, looking at how each of our department operates. So there's no magic solution, but it is job creation, focusing on making sure we have businesses that are located here, which brings us, of course, sales tax and other kinds of benefits to that. 2, pension reform, not just for new employees, but looking at current employees, which means you have to be able to negotiate and look at our pension systems from age of retirement to contributions, all of the things that we're looking at. And 3, on the efficiencies. I found, particularly, there are things we could do differently in the city of Los Angeles that help us balance the budget. And so hopefully everyone will look down on some of these. One is, of course, parking lot operators, all kinds of things that will balance the budget.
The chief administrative officer says that if the city doesn't stop some of the proposed salary increases, not proposed, but future salary increases that have already been negotiated, and make some serious pension and health care benefit reforms, the city could run up another $260 million deficit in the coming years. What's your position on making these changes that the chief administrative officer is recommending?
And I said publicly on Monday that right now the budget, you said, is not in the next years. We still have $100 and some odd million deficit going forward, and can't afford at this point in time for those raises to go forward. We can't afford necessarily to keep going in a system where healthcare and pension costs are a greater percentage of our budget, and we have to sit down at the table and have an honest and fair conversation. And I think that's Why? When I look at the kind of diverse support that I have from labor and business, from people who represent working families, who represent small businesses, they've said Wendy's going to roll up her sleeves, get the job done, focus in what we need to do to solve the problem. And that means addressing that kind of negotiation to get it done.
So would it be your intention then, entering these negotiations, to go in with the idea that you're going to freeze these upcoming salary increases, at least for a couple
That
of years?
will definitely, yes, be on the table, and I've mentioned that to them as well, to the labor leaders.
Some of the critics of Measure A said they didn't like it because it's a regressive tax, a sales tax. So in terms of raising revenue, are you going to, is that an issue that you have in mind, whether this way of raising revenue is regressive or not?
Well, look, I was not for Measure A, and I felt strongly that the city council and mayor had not demonstrated that, in fact, they'd done everything to balance the budget. A lot of people are sitting here today saying the sky was going to fall. You heard everybody say, we're going to be laying off, all these things are going to happen. And lo and behold, that didn't happen. Now, part of that is revenue came in unexpectedly at a different level, but the public is frustrated. I'm a city controller, equally frustrated that we want to be transparent about where we are in the city of Los Angeles, where we're spending money, how we're spending it, and how we're going to get out of this position.
I'm still not sure if you address the issue of whether you would adopt some regressive form of raising revenue, or whether you would rule that out. Because that was a criticism about the sales tax, that raising it, it hurts poor people, middle-class people more than it does other folks.
Well, and I think, look, Measure R was a sales tax that we did for transportation. It was focused in on particular responsibility, and it was spent for something. The residents of Los Angeles historically have said, if we know where the money's going and it's going for a particular purpose, we will adopt that. I'm not at the position today that I think we have to go back to the voters and ask them for more money until we address the issues that I think make Los Angeles a much more fiscally responsible city.
Another issue that concerns people in LA is the homeless problem in the city. LA has probably the worst homeless problem of any city in the country. We're pretty close to it. It seems like every 4 years we hear that the next mayor is going to take care of this problem, and he's got some, but it never seems to kind of translate into reality. So what are you going to do to fix this problem? And again, I say, how will you pay for it?
Well, I believe we can end homelessness in a period of time within the next several years, of really particularly those that are on a day-to-day basis, those that are the chronic homeless. I have a unique experience because I served not only working for Tom Bradley on the issue of homeless and worked with him as, I guess, probably, I don't know if we didn't have an official title, but homeless coordinator in the mayor's office, to be the deputy director of the Interagency Council on the Homeless for the Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C., working with all of the different departments to see how we work with veterans, how we work on mental health issues, families and singles, and looked nationally in models and helped develop the national continuum of care of ending homelessness. So it takes a couple of things that I would look at as how we're going to deal with the issue of homelessness, and how I have done it when I was a city council member as well. Number one, being more competitive on the federal grants on the federal level. I don't believe we're getting the dollars that we need. Los Angeles is heretofore not been as competitive as I think we should be. It's working with HUD and looking at our Section 8 programs and how we look at more project-based that assist us in doing that. It is 3, having the public-private partnership. Right now, United Way, Chamber of Commerce, have been working very closely with a number of organizations to help end homelessness. I think the other piece of that is working on veterans. 40% of the homeless are veterans. Those that have risked their lives for us come from being in the military and suddenly have nowhere to go. When I worked for Mayor Bradley, one of the things I fought for was on the Veterans Administration property. There was a vacant building, seismically unsafe. We said we will pay for it to be actually upgraded. We want to just make sure that we can have homeless veterans there. And at that time, the Veterans Administration said to us, sorry, no, we'd rather have it vacant. And so we fought really hard to make sure that happened, and now there's a great program in there that is providing for homeless veterans, critical to the future of addressing the issue. But it's also about prevention. Sorry, I get going on this one because I'm passionate about it, which is prevention. There are so many families that they may lose their job for healthcare reasons, or, excuse me, lose their home because they've got high cost of healthcare. They may lose it because of a job. And if we could just give them that little bit of a, for lack of a term, an arc between the two, a relationship, a bridge, then it would cost us less to give them a couple months of rental housing. It's very, very important. And the last thing that I want to talk about is that when I worked for Mayor Bradley, we sued the County of Los Angeles. Not something you do frequently. We sued them because we said that the policy decisions that you have made have caused more homeless on the streets of Los Angeles. General relief reimbursements, some of their other policies. And out of that lawsuit decision, what we ended up doing, of course, was a settlement, was the creation of the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority. The idea was there should be coordination between the city and the county. What I found has happened is I believe that people said, well, we have that organization over here that's taking care of it, so we don't have to deal with it. If you live in Skid Row, you see homeless, but if you live in parts of the west side or in San Fernando Valley or others, you don't see the homeless, so you don't think there's a problem. We've got to determine a way that it comes up to the top level, that it's not just when it appears in the newspaper or when someone dies on the streets of LA. It impacts people every single day.
In the past, the city has relied heavily on the LAPD to address the homeless problem. Would you, as mayor, talk to Chief Beck about formulating a different role for the LAPD that would, and not to blame the police department, but what can they do beyond moving a homeless person from one area to another?
Well, I think, it's not only the LAPD. I mean, I've met with the firefighters who are down there in Skid Row, and they become social service providers. The LAPD becomes a social service provider. That is the exact opposite of what we should be seeing in the communities, which is getting the homeless off the street into permanent supportive housing.
So how do we pay
all
for
about
that housing? That's the big
Well,
question.
it is not only the public-private partnerships that I've talked about in the federal government, but the state tax credits. It's the ability to say, how do we create more units than we have in the past? And the trust fund that existed many years ago hasn't existed in a long time. Bring back that and the focus and attention on housing.
I want to ask you for your position on the Community Care Facilities Ordinance, which according to United Way LA, would eliminate shared housing in single-family neighborhoods, threatening, according to United Way, the shared housing arrangements of tens of thousands of veterans, seniors, students, low-income families, and people with disabilities. But also these shared housing arrangements sometimes are not very popular in the neighborhoods where they're located.
Well, it's always the devil's in the details. I think that the proposal that had come forward, there were a lot of concerns that it, in fact, would limit some of the housing that was desperately needed in some of these communities. And that it is all about the measure that you get to a level that says you want to be able to have that shared housing, at the same time not impact a particular neighborhood with 6 on a street, and have some of the challenges that come with that concentration. So I think my position was that it needed some work to be able to ensure that you are not discriminating against one part of the population against another.
The proposed ordinance needs work, is what
Yes.
you're saying, so that it would not apply to all these forms of shared housing, but only certain kinds.
I think it's about, again, the issue of how many are in a particular location, and that's what you really need to deal with.
How would you go about protecting the film industry in LA and bringing more TV? This is from one of our audience members, and bringing more TV work back to the city.
Yeah. Well, something I'm very proud of that I have been working on for more than a decade. Part of my experience in Los Angeles has been as the one of the executives at DreamWorks Movie Studios and one of the members of the California Film Commission, and been fighting from the first time we had California Film First to now having on the California Film Commission the tax incentives that we have. As I was at an event earlier this evening, someone talked about how it's impacted their family, that their family is gone half of the year at least because of tax credits that are offered in New York. New York now is not only offering tax credits for filming, but for post-production, starting to steal from us. So I've been a strong advocate from lobbying on the state level to being on the Film Commission to say we need to increase the amount of tax credits that we have in the state of California. Although $100 million sounds like a lot, it's not a lot in the competition. Also that it's only now 2 years, that in 2 years from now, if you wanted to plan that you were going to have a film and you'd get that tax credit, you have to depend on the legislature. No disrespect to them, but who's in the legislature, will they actually pass it? So that is, I have to tell you, and if you asked anyone in Los Angeles, that the production tax credits are the reason they either stay or go. There are other things that we can do, and I'm proud of what I've done in the city council and pushing forward to ensure, reduction in cost, reduction in the taxes, reduction in fees and getting rid of the fees, all of those things that are critically important to keeping the industry here. But as important is a mayor who gets that entertainment industry and is going to work with. I want to have a cabinet of individuals who are from the entertainment industry. I'm going to be the job czar because I come from that industry to make sure that we keep those jobs here and that we don't let them go away. But it's going to take not only locally but state. Money.
Yeah. But would you acknowledge, though, that what's been done so far, while it has had some impact, really has, overall, the trend of moving away from the LA area still continues? I mean, it hasn't really stopped that.
And as I've said, New York would never let Wall Street leave, Los Angeles shouldn't let Hollywood leave. And it has, although, again, we've had some success here, we are still seeing not just runaway, but runaway production. And so we're going to have to look at not only keeping it here, but the diversifying of that industry is now not just about in front of the camera, back of the camera. The kind of industry we have now is technology, and how you're going to have those post-production around there, how you're going to make sure that the kinds of things that are happening on the internet, these are not just what you see on TV or go to the movie studios, or the movie theaters. It's important to keep that industry here, and I've demonstrated over the years my position and my advocacy on that.
Another question from the audience. As mayor, how will you view your role in improving education for children in LAUSD? What should the role be for charter schools, and what will your priorities be for K through 12 education?
Well, I'll go back to make sure you look at my plan, because I have a couple pages on that. But look, I'm a graduate of LAUSD, Knollwood Elementary, Frost Junior High, and John F. Kennedy High School. My son goes to Colfax Elementary School, 4th grade. I remember being asked when I was pregnant on the city council, and someone said to me, "Do you feel obligated to send your kid to public school?" And I said, "No, I want to send my kid to public school. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just lucky I had him at 42 years old. I'm going to do what's best for him." And most importantly, it's the local school that we have. So let me just tell you some of the principles of things that I think are important. One is local control. I can tell you, if you meet with a principal, you will know exactly whether or not that's a good school or a not so good school. Remember when I was a city council member, I went to all 35 of my schools. And I went to one school, and this woman had a whole list. Miss Manrique at Fair Avenue Elementary School, still there after 12 years. And she had a list of things she needed me to do. Parking, gang issues, safety, valet, all that. I went to another school, and this woman looked at me and she says, I don't really know why you're here. I only have 10 minutes, and because you have nothing to do with me, and I don't have much time for you. And I knew right then and there, she was not a good principal. She didn't get it. She didn't get the partnership. The importance of having that local control. Principals, Principal Academy. Not everyone are leaders. People could do other things, but they cannot lead. The school at my son's school, was a 650 API Title I school. Today is a 928. A 928. And it was a Title I school till about a year ago. 42% of the kids eligible for free lunch. And why did that happen, and why did we do so well? Miss Joni Freckman. Joni Freckman came in and said, I'm going to hold the parents accountable, the teachers accountable, and I'm going to take on the bureaucracy at the district and do what's best for my kids. And she did, and she changed it. And when she suddenly, when I was about ready to start to go to that school with my son, said she was going to retire, and I told her she couldn't, she said, I'm going to wait a year. I want us to become an affiliated charter. And I said, well, what's that? She said, affiliated charter means that 10 parents, 10 teachers get to hire who their principal is. And she said, I gave too much of my life to not see this school succeed. And we ultimately hired the assistant principal. So it's about, I think, local control, local choices. I've been consistent, parent trigger, looking at schools that make sure that the parents have a say in what's happening and that the teachers have a say. When you think about our schools, and you think about the fact that we're 49th in the country in per pupil spending, that is criminal. When you think about the fact that we don't provide the kind of resources to our teachers that are necessary, but we also need to hold them accountable. And we all have stories about great teachers and those that haven't been performing in the way we need to. Provide them with the resources, hold them accountable, and make sure that we get those schools to succeed.
Do you support the governor's proposal that schools in poorer areas and schools with more English learners should get more funding than the other schools?
Well, I think, I have had some discussions with people in the governor's office about this issue and to see how it works in practice. I think clearly when you look at, for example, the national standard or national statistics show that 10% of the schools are responsible for 50% of the dropouts, you understand that. When you see that in some of the schools, in some of our lower income areas, The principals aren't staying there more than a few years. There's not that consistency. We need to invest in those schools to make sure we have higher graduation rates. And I think it's important when we look at that to see that the funding goes across the city of Los Angeles. Because one of the things that's a challenge is some of these schools that were affiliated charters that decided to have a little bit more, and these are all over the city, they're in different parts, they may be damaged by that movement. We have to see what the pendulum swings and make sure there's a balance and fairness. So I'm going to continue to work with the state to see how that's going to impact all of Los Angeles. But I think, look, it's clear in many communities they have been shortchanged. They need more resources, and we need to have a formula that does that.
So is it fair to say that in principle you're supportive, but you want to see how it works out?
Absolutely.
So this is a question that came from Twitter. Young Invincibles, one of the sponsoring groups, and the question is, what are ways that we can improve opportunities and financial support for higher education? As mayor, is there anything that you can really do in terms of funding for higher education?
Well, I think it is advocacy and bully pulpit as well. We live in a city that we have an abundance of riches in a way of as far as educational institutions. I'm a Bruin, so of course I'd say UCLA, but UCLA, USC, Cal State Northridge, Occidental, Loyola, and Caltech is just outside of the city of Los Angeles. These are institutions and our community colleges, which are, used to be called junior colleges, but they're not junior colleges. They're community colleges that are giving young people an opportunity who may not get into that four-year university or who have to work to be able to afford to go to college. I think it is making sure that we work with all of those entities to ensure that our children have access to that. Because we recruit young people to come to our universities, and we never recruit them to stay. We never recruit them to stay, and we've invested in that creative capital. Let's have those hubs of economic activity around. Let's go, and I want to have a cabinet of all of the university presidents in addition to the community college presidents to link up to make sure our high school students can go to those community colleges and the next level. It's a misnomer for some of our, I will look at UCLA, for example, as calling it a public institution. There's not much public dollars that go into those universities anymore. And I think that, the great thing about the state of California has been affordable university systems. We cannot lose that, plus of what the state is, and so it's making sure we have a state that is creating those opportunities and having a state that's business friendly, that's going to bring more money in and manage our money in a way that's effective.
There are a lot of quality of life issues that people in LA are concerned about now, particularly in some respects because there's less funding to deal with those issues, like street repairs, potholes, that kind of thing. Some council members now are touring the city, having town hall meetings, suggesting that the answer might be a multi-billion-dollar bond measure, that the voters will decide do they want to spend money to fix these potholes and sidewalks and some of the other problems. Do you support that?
I haven't taken a position on that. I was not in favor when it was going before because it had been rushed through. And again, you have to be honest and transparent with the public. The concern is, how are you spending the money you have currently? I know for sidewalk repair, for example, right now it would take us $1 billion in 85 years just to fix the sidewalks that we know are broken. One of the sayings, stories I repeat, is a friend of mine who said, we live in a city where our rivers are paved and our streets are not. And that sends a very bad message. So we have to invest in our infrastructure. We have to make sure that we have the dollars available in the city of Los Angeles and put more money to that street repair. So I guess I'd say I have an open mind going forward, but you have to demonstrate to the public that you've done everything you possibly can. I'll give you one example where I was critical of the city when I did an audit because we got federal money through the stimulus grant and multi-million dollars are supposed to be shovel-ready projects. I remember that, shovel-ready projects. And guess what happened? They decided it took them 6 months to figure out how they'd go out to bid to actually select who was going to fix the streets and do that. That isn't shovel-ready, and that isn't thinking about how we're going to use that money more effectively. So I'm glad that they're going out across the city and getting people to understand what we can afford, what we can't, and what would be sacrificed if they ask them for it. And I think we've just got to demonstrate as a city, though, that we're using our money effectively.
Well, we're in the home stretch now. I want to ask you a question by one of our sponsoring groups. According to the Liberty Hill Foundation, a foundation that focuses on environmental justice, LA has more than 50 boards and commissions, more than 300 appointed members of these boards and commissions overseeing city agencies and advising the mayor. But the foundation says that the commission and boards are not representative of LA's different ethnic and racial groups. Do you agree with that? And if so, what specific steps would you take to change that?
Well, I think, I grew up in a time working for Mayor Bradley when the diversity of those commissions were so important. And I remember always making sure that we had representation geographically, ethnically, gender, and being able to ensure that we have people who live in LA who can serve on those commissions. First and foremost, I would open it up to people all over the city of Los Angeles, in essence, to apply, to be part of that commission representation. And to make sure that we have people who are willing to give their time and energy and that also understand the issues. Not political patronage, but understand the issues that they're going to be dealing with when they're on those commissions. It's critically important. And I also think that we have to look at individuals who are willing to take some tough stands too and be able to move the needle, not just be the status quo. As mayor of Los Angeles, I want to shake up the system a bit. I want to shake up and say, how do we change LA and move it forward? 11% unemployment rate is not good enough. Making sure that we are fixing our streets and that we have an educational system that is going to be effective. That's the kind of mayor I'm going to be, and I'm going to have commissioners that are going to be in that same vein. I remember being actually in this room working with a number of women to support having more women on those commissions, having more women run for office, and connecting with people to make sure that that happens.
Would that be a priority for you?
Absolutely, because I think who you appoint as your commission and your commissioners is reflective of the kind of mayor you're going to be and the kind of leadership you're going to set for the future of LA.
I think we're coming down to the end here, but I just want to ask you quickly, and this is just a question that I'm throwing out, and that is that both you and Mr. Garcetti are very eloquent on the issue questions that we've talked about. I think you both made a good presentation on a wide variety of issues. Why hasn't this campaign, why has this campaign not connected with the public, with the voters? I mean, why has there been so little passion outside of the candidates and their supporters? What's gone wrong here?
Well, I think, look, I've talked to a lot of people who are passionate. I've been at events where people are passionate about my race, what I'm doing, that I have a plan, I mean, unless you got this in the mail and I did a press conference and I talked about, here's all the things I want to do in Los Angeles, and more, but you didn't read about it, because they don't want to write about what you want to talk about, which is the plan about how you're going to deal with environment and budget and job creation and all those other things that are so critically important. And I think that there's a little bit of fatigue. You have a big national presidential race, but there are differences between the two candidates. There's differences from my perspective of the kinds of qualifications that I have, the experience that I have, the ability to manage. As I said the other night, I may not be the best campaigner, but I'm a good manager. I may not be the best politician, but I'm a good leader. And right now, people want someone who doesn't just want to be the mayor, they want to do the job of mayor. I've gone all over the city and excited young people, excited everyone who about
But they're not showing up at the polls, or at least they didn't in the primary. Is it the negative tone that has turned people off?
No, I think it is in the 21% that you had in the primary, and that's, I don't think we've had a lot higher. I mean, this is pretty low, but we haven't historically had in city races. I am very much in favor of moving the election to a different time that is consistent with other elections to get a higher percentage of vote. I will give you an example. When I ran my first time for city council, it was a special election the first time, so I was the only thing on the ballot in December, and there were 11,000 people who voted. The runoff was in a primary election for the state of California. 30,000 people voted in my district. A huge change. We want people to get to the ballot and to be able to vote, and to be able to understand that their vote matters. Because I'll tell you, what impacts your life every single day, traffic, jobs, education, streets being repaved, your trees being trimmed, guess who's responsible for that? The city of Los Angeles and the mayor of Los Angeles. And so part of it is incumbent upon all of us, and the media, and all of you in this room to say, it matters that you go out and vote. I won by 225 votes out of 30,000 that first time. 225 votes. Knocking on doors and talking to people. That's what we need to do and get excited. I'm excited about it. I'm getting people excited in the city of Los Angeles to not only elect the most qualified, but make history and to be able to deal with a great city and leading Los Angeles forward. I hope in the back you will pick up my plan. I hope you will go to my website, wendygrohl.org, and to really learn about how I'm going to lead Los Angeles forward. And with you and together, we're going to be able to make and change Los Angeles and make sure that our children and our grandchildren have a place where they can live and be able to have a good quality of life. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
both of you sort of made the argument for closing statement at the end, even though it wasn't part of the.
We're good at this, aren't we? We've done it a few
You've done it a
times.
few times, 50 or 60, right?
At least.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, thanks, Dave. Hi, everyone, I'm Maya Page.